Welcome to the Preschool Transitional Kindergarten Learning Foundations, or PTKLF, presentation of the science domain. This pre-recorded presentation is part of the series of presentations developed by the California Department of Education in partnership with WestEd that follows the release of the PTKLF to provide a snapshot of each domain covered in the publication. This presentation is focused on the science domain, and we are joined by the writer of this domain, Lynette Solis. For an overview of the introduction of the PTKLF publication, including its structure, organizations, and major revisions, please visit our prior pre-recorded presentation titled PTKLF Introductions. And my name is Lily Moffett, and I am an Education Research and Evaluation Consultant in the Early Education Division at the California Department of Education. The agenda for today is to provide acknowledgements for the acknowledgements for the contributions of this specific domain, provide an overview of the organization of this domain, and provide examples of foundations in each strand. One for science and engineering practices, physical science, life science, earth and space science, and finally, engineering, technology, and applications of science. Then we will provide an overview of the diversity of children's science skills, followed by a brief section on how educators can support science learning. We'll end with a closing and look at future pre-recorded presentations. So we want to take a moment to list some acknowledgements for individuals who contributed significant time to the development of this domain. In addition to the California Department of Education and WestEd team, we had our WestEd lead writer, Lynette Solis. We also consulted with subject matter experts, Martha Alexot from the University of Georgia, Kimberly Brenneman from the Heising-Simons Foundation, Andre Bustamante from UC Irvine, and Daryl Greenfield from the University of Miami. We also had specific reviewers who brought the lens of inclusion, cultural diversity, and multilingual learners. Juliana Meltzi from NYU, Mary McLean from the University of Florida, Felicia Moore-Mensah from Teachers College Columbia University, and Margaret Gillis from SRI International. We'd also like to thank our many educators and interest holders who participated in focus groups and provided feedback. I'll now pass it on to the WestEd lead writer to talk through the details of this domain.
Thank you. I will first start with the overall definition, structure, and organization of this domain. The PTKLF in the domain of science describes the knowledge and skills that young children can develop and demonstrate in their daily learning experiences. As children play and interact with others and their environment, they are constantly encountering opportunities to investigate and solve problems related to science phenomena. Children explore concepts related to living things and non-living things, the weather, objects in the sky, for example, the sun, moon, and stars, and how their actions impact the environment around them. Children identify everyday problems and play and learning experiences that they solve through trial and error and by exploring their prior knowledge. As children explore their environment, they use tools, digital devices, and mathematics skills to measure, document, and make sense of their observations. The science domain is organized as follows. The first strand is science and engineering practices, which includes observation and investigation and documentation, analysis, and communication. The second strand is physical science, which includes properties and characteristics of non-living objects and materials and changes in non-living objects and materials. The third strand is life science, which includes properties and characteristics of living things and changes in living things. The fourth strand is earth and space science, which includes properties and characteristics of earth materials and objects and changes in earth and space. And the fifth strand is engineering, technology, and applications of science, which includes engineering design and society. This is a sample of how the foundations are structured. In this case, the foundation is numbered 3.5, which indicates it is within the third strand of life science and the fifth foundation focused on habitats. The specific statements are then underneath this label and describe the skills that children can demonstrate in an early foundation, the column on the left, and a later foundation, the column on the right. Below these foundation statements are a series of examples, only one of which is listed here to demonstrate. The first 1 to 2 examples for each foundation are aligned to demonstrate the developmental progression more clearly. So what has changed from the 2012 preschool foundations? First, the strands, substrands, and foundations have been revised to better align with the K-12 Next Generation Science Standards and create a progression from preschool and TK to the K-3 expectations. Foundations and examples also reflect the diversity of California's children and families and reflect the funds of knowledge of children's families and communities that inform their science learning. Foundations, examples, and teaching strategies provide ideas for educators to enhance the focus on playful, hands-on ways of engaging children in science and engineering learning, indoors and outdoors. Cross-cutting concepts, which align with what is in the K-12 Next Generation Science Standards, are underlying themes or ways of thinking that are common to all disciplines of science. Children notice and explore cross-cutting concepts as they learn about science phenomena across science disciplines. Multiple cross-cutting concepts can be explored within one science topic. For example, noticing patterns in a caterpillar's stripes when engaging in observations, or understanding cause and effect when observing the clouds outside and deducing that it might rain. To utilizing scale, proportion, and quantity, like using larger blocks on the bottom of a tower to create a more stable foundation. To systems and system models, like understanding that wind moves turbines, which creates energy. And structure and function, like when studying which materials float or sink in water. And finally, stability and change, such as noticing a change in plants when moving them closer to the window or sunlight. You will see references to different cross-cutting concepts throughout the science domain in call-out boxes, and I encourage you to take a deeper look into the publication at these sections. Now I will present some sample foundations within each strand. The first strand is science and engineering practices, which covers the observation, investigation, communication, and problem-solving skills that children demonstrate as they explore science phenomena, encounter engineering problems, and share their science insights during everyday play and learning situations. This foundation sample comes from the observation and investigation substrand and is focused on making predictions. The early foundation is focused on making simple predictions, giving simple reasons for predictions, and checking predictions with adult support. For example, in the early foundation, a child may make a simple prediction about how far a car may roll down a ramp. Then in the later foundation, they make more detailed predictions based on prior experiences and observations and create plans with adult support to check their predictions and even discuss why predictions were correct or incorrect. For example, a child may predict how far a car may roll down a ramp and base their prediction on the material at the bottom of the ramp, like a rug versus a tile floor, and observe that it won't go as far on the rug because the rug is too fuzzy, whereas the tile floor is smooth. So you can tell how the child went from making a simple prediction to providing more detailed reasons for their prediction based on past experience working with materials. The second strand is physical science, which covers children's investigation and understanding of core concepts related to the characteristics and physical properties of objects and materials, changes in objects and materials, and physical phenomena, such as sound, light and shadows, the motion of objects, and energy. This sample foundation comes from the changes in non-living objects substrand and is focused on exploring changes in objects and materials. In the early foundation, children explore and describe changes in objects and materials using their senses during play and collaborative investigations. For example, the child may notice that the ice in a cup is now water In the later foundation, children explore and describe in greater detail the changes in objects and materials. For example, the child may describe the ice melting in more detail by communicating that the ice cube got smaller and smaller as it turned to water, and conclude that the ice melted. So you can see how the child goes from noticing a change to being able to describe the change and why it may have happened in greater detail. The life science strand covers children's investigation and understanding of core concepts related to the properties and characteristics of living things. For example, humans, animals, and plants, their bodily processes, growth and change over time, and habitats. This sample foundation comes from the changes in living things substrand in the life science strand and is focused on the needs of living things. In the early foundation, children recognize that animals and plants require care and show an emerging understanding that feeding and watering support the growth and survival of humans, animals, and plants. For example, a child may observe a plant and communicate, "This one needs water." Then in the later foundation, they are able to describe the needs of humans, animals, and plants for growth and survival. For example, they may communicate, "The plants near the window grew, but the plants with no light are more yellow. I hope they don't die," to their teacher. So you can see how the developmental continuum goes from an emerging understanding that the living things like plants need water to grow to a more detailed understanding of when a living thing like a plant may need more water or sunlight, and that not getting enough could mean that the plant could die. The Earth and Space Science strand covers children's investigation and understanding of core concepts related to the characteristics and physical properties of Earth materials in the immediate environment and changes in Earth, including the movement and apparent changes of natural objects in the sky, for example, the sun and the moon, and changes in the seasons and weather. The Earth and Space Science strand also includes a foundation on children's awareness of the impact of humans' behavior on the environment and efforts to care for the environment. This sample foundation comes from the properties and characteristics of Earth materials and objects substrand, focused on characteristics of Earth materials. In the early foundation, children investigate and describe the characteristics of Earth materials such as sand, rocks, soil, water, and air. For example, a child may use a magnifying glass given to them by the teacher to observe sand and communicate, "I can see many tiny pieces." Then, in the later foundation, children not only investigate and describe characteristics, but begin to compare and contrast materials on their different features. So a child may pour water in the sandbox and compare the dry sand with the wet sand. The child could communicate, "The wet sand sticks together," and demonstrate how to make a sand cake by filling up the bucket with wet sand and turning it over. So you can tell the developmental continuum goes from mere observation of sand to comparing dry sand with wet sand. The engineering, technology, and applications of science strand covers children's skills related to the engineering design process. That is, identify a problem, plan and create solutions, and test and refine solutions to solve problems they encounter in their play and interactions with others in their environment. This strand also includes children's use of tools, including digital devices, to meet the problems and goals they encounter in everyday situations. This example is from the engineering design substrand, and it is focused on the engineering design process. In the early foundation, a child engages collaboratively with peers and adults in the engineering design process by identifying problems in play and other activities and planning and creating simple solutions to the problems they identify. For example, after a teacher reads about different types of buildings, a child may build a castle with blocks with the teacher and add a block with a slanted side, explaining to the teacher, "This is so wheelchairs can go up the castle." In the later foundation, children create more detailed solutions to the problems they identify and test and refine those solutions with less adult support over longer periods of time. For example, after the teacher reads about different types of buildings, the child and a peer may create their own city by first planning out their city in a drawing and then using magnetic tiles to build tall and short structures over a series of days. I also want to highlight that the science domain emphasizes the importance of children's diversity in their participation and engagement in science and engineering learning experiences. Early science learning provides all children opportunities to explore scientific phenomena using their senses and make meaning based on their prior knowledge and experiences. Equitable science and engineering learning experiences build on children's identities and personal characteristics. Science and engineering experiences are also language-rich opportunities for multilingual learners to develop their communication skills and expand their vocabulary in the languages they are learning. Multilingual learners use their home languages, English, or a combination of all the languages they are learning to express what they observe and the meaning they make. They may also demonstrate their understanding through drawing and modeling with different materials and through movement and play. Early science learning can also provide many opportunities for children to apply their prior knowledge and connect with their families' and communities' ways of knowing. The science foundations also underscore the importance of the connection between children's cultural and racial knowledge and learning experiences. Their cultural and racial experiences can enhance how children engage in scientific inquiry and engineering practices. For example, different cultures may have different norms around question asking, and young children may follow different norms regarding how and when they ask questions. Children from Native nations and tribal communities may draw on their interactions with nature, cultural practices, and communal ways of knowing as they learn about scientific concepts. Teachers have an important opportunity to observe children and connect with families to understand how children's cultural and racial experiences can strengthen exploration and learning in science. The science domain also represents how children with disabilities may engage with science and engineering learning opportunities. Children who require accommodations to display mastery of the foundations can use different forms of communication, technologies, or adaptive equipment to share their science and engineering knowledge and skills. They may use verbal language, nonverbal gestures, sign language, a picture exchange communication system, or an electronic assistive technology communication device. Children may also make observations through touch, smell, or sound, and may demonstrate their observations by pointing or gesturing, expressing joy or enthusiasm, or focusing their attention on a scientific phenomenon or engineering problem. The foundations also have many supporting sections of examples for how educators can facilitate children's science and engineering learning. I will highlight a few main categories of teacher strategies and instructional supports. Science and engineering learning in early childhood involves inquiry-based, playful approaches. By observing children closely, teachers can draw on children's questions and interests to set up opportunities for experiments and investigations, and for children to practice their science and engineering vocabulary. There are countless opportunities, indoors and outdoors, for children to experience, investigate, and discuss science and engineering. Whether children notice the change in seasons, become interested in the differences between various fruits at snack time, or notice their shadow on a walk, teachers can take everyday opportunities to engage children in explorations and conversations about science and engineering phenomena. In addition to everyday interactions, it is important to consider how science is intentionally embedded in content areas and the curriculum. Science topics make amazing curriculum units of study from which all other content areas can be embedded. For example, science topic areas covered in the foundations like life science can be integrated during literacy activities such as reading books on living things and using art and music to bring observations to life. Other science foundations that cover engineering and design can also be meaningfully integrated with math activities like geometry and spatial thinking, as well as art and activities that promote physical development. An implementation of curricula is not complete without intentionality in setting up learning environments with varied learning materials to promote children's exploration and firsthand experience of science and engineering. For example, everyday objects, natural materials, books, and tools for observation, measurement, and documentation. The materials and resources in the environment should represent diversity in languages, race, culture, and gender. Tools should allow children with varying abilities to engage in science and engineering and help make connections between science and engineering and children's daily life. And materials should also support children in communicating their understanding through varied means of expression and representation.
In closing, for a more detailed view of science development, Read the full document published on CDE's website. Future pre-recorded presentations will also be published on the CDE website as they are released. To access the website, visit https://www.cde.gov/re/PS Foundation ASP. Thank you for listening to today's pre-recorded presentation.